The piano echoed through the grand ballroom. The world's elite waited for the moment Jonathan Reed, tech billionaire, would slip the ring onto his bride's finger. Clara Vance, heiress to Europe's largest media empire, stood radiant in silk and diamonds. But between the fireworks and camera flashes, a small voice cut through the celebration from the back of the hall. "Mr. Reed, this contract, it's not what you think." Every head turned. A young girl in a simple dress stood trembling, holding a document in her hands, the daughter of the housekeeper who worked in Jonathan's mansion. And in that instant, a $2 billion wedding came to a sudden halt. But before we continue, make sure you've subscribed to the channel and drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. We'd love to know how far this story has traveled. Jonathan Reed was 38 years old and worth more than most small countries. He had built Nexora Innovations from a single apartment into a global software empire that powered half the internet. His algorithms ran financial systems, his platforms connected millions, and his name appeared on Forbes lists with predictable regularity. But success had made him cold. He calculated risks the way others felt emotions. He made decisions based on data, not instinct. And when it came to marriage, he approached it the same way he approached mergers, strategically. Clara Vance was 35, elegant, educated, and equally pragmatic. She was the daughter of Richard Vance, the media mogul who controlled newspapers, television networks, and digital platforms across 3 continents. Their union wasn't about love. It was about power. 2 empires merging into something unstoppable. The wedding was scheduled for Saturday at the Eden Palace Hotel. Invitations had been sent to prime ministers, CEOs, and celebrities. The event would be broadcast live. The guest list alone was worth billions. But in the sprawling mansion where Jonathan lived, far from the spotlights and champagne, life moved at a different pace. Maria Cruz had worked as Jonathan's housekeeper for 6 years. She cleaned quietly, efficiently, invisibly. She knew which rooms he preferred, which coffee he drank, and when to stay out of sight. She was grateful for the job. It paid well. It kept a roof over her daughter's head. Her daughter Elena was 14 years old. Elena was small for her age, with sharp eyes and an even sharper mind. While other kids her age spent time on social media, Elena read. Not novels, not magazines, legal textbooks, court transcripts, old contracts her mother sometimes brought home from the estate office, discarded documents Jonathan's team no longer needed. She was fascinated by how words could protect people or destroy them, how a single clause could change everything, how power was often hidden in paragraphs most people never bothered to read. Maria didn't understand it. "Why do you waste time on boring papers, Misha?" Elena would smile. "Because the boring parts are where people hide the truth." The week before the wedding, the mansion became a whirlwind of activity. Florists, caterers, security teams, stylists. Jonathan's staff worked around the clock preparing for the event. Maria was assigned to help coordinate the cleaning of the guest suites and ensure every surface gleamed. Elena stayed out of the way as always, reading in the small staff quarters behind the kitchen. On Thursday evening, 2 days before the ceremony, Clara's assistant arrived with a leather portfolio. Elena watched from the hallway as the woman handed it to Jonathan's executive assistant, a stern man named Gerald. "This is the final prenuptial agreement," the assistant said. "Confidential. Mr. Reed needs to review and sign before Saturday." Gerald nodded, took the sealed envelope marked "Confidential Marriage Contract, Reed Vance Holdings," and placed it on the desk in the study. Elena didn't think much of it. But later that night, when she passed the study to bring her mother forgotten cleaning supplies, she noticed something. A single document lay on the side table near the window. Not in the envelope. Not sealed. Just there, as if someone had pulled it out to review and forgotten to put it back. Elena glanced around. The hallway was empty. The house was quiet. She stepped inside. The document was thick, maybe 30 pages, printed on expensive paper with embossed letterhead. The title read, "Binding Marital and Corporate Agreement Between Jonathan Reed and Clara Vance." She knew she shouldn't touch it. Her mother had warned her 100 times. Never go through their things. Never ask questions. We're staff, not family. But something in Elena couldn't walk away. She picked up the document just to glance at the first page. to see what a billionaire's marriage contract looked like, to understand how the powerful protected themselves. She started reading. At first it was standard legal language. Division of assets, custody terms if children were involved, confidentiality clauses. Nothing unusual. But then on page 23, buried deep in the technical jargon, she saw something that made her stomach drop. A single sentence, dense and deliberately obscure, hidden among paragraphs about intellectual property rights. She read it twice to make sure she understood. Then a third time, her hands beginning to shake. This wasn't a marriage contract. This was a trap. And if Jonathan Reed signed it, he would lose everything. Elena stood frozen in the study, the document trembling in her hands, her mind racing. She had to tell someone. But who would believe a 14-year-old housekeeper's daughter? Elena's eyes fixed on the paragraph again, her heart pounding in her chest. Section 47, subsection D, Intellectual Property Transfer Clause. Upon execution of this marital agreement and legal union, all intellectual property rights, patents, trademarks, proprietary algorithms, and equity shares associated with Nexora Innovations shall be transferred in full to Vance Global Holdings as part of the consolidated marital estate. This transfer shall be irrevocable and binding upon signature. She read it a fourth time slower now, making sure she understood every word. This wasn't about sharing assets in a marriage. This was about ownership, complete ownership. The moment Jonathan signed this contract and said, "I do everything," he had built, every line of code, every patent, every algorithm that powered his empire would legally belong to the Vance family. Nexora Innovations, the company he had spent 15 years building, would cease to be his. And buried this deep in legal language, surrounded by standard clauses about property division and confidentiality, most people would never notice it. Even Jonathan himself might skim past it, trusting his lawyers had reviewed everything. But Elena had read enough contracts to recognize manipulation when she saw it. This wasn't a prenup. This was a corporate takeover disguised as a wedding. She carefully folded the document and slipped it under her sweater. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely keep her grip. She left the study as quietly as she had entered, her mind spinning with questions. Did Jonathan know? Did Clara know? Or was this something hidden even from them, inserted by lawyers working for the Vance empire? She found her mother in the laundry room folding linens for the guest suites. "Mama." Elena's voice came out breathless. "I need to show you something." Maria looked up, immediately concerned. "Mija, what's wrong? You look pale." Elena pulled out the document, unfolding it on the folding table. "This is Mr. Reed's wedding contract. I found it in the study. Look at this part." She pointed to section 47. Maria leaned in, squinting at the dense legal text. She read slowly, her English good but not perfect, her brow furrowing as she tried to parse the meaning. "I don't understand all these words, Elena. It says that when he signs this and marries Clara, his entire company becomes hers. Not shared, not protected, transferred. Completely. He loses everything." Maria's face went pale. She looked at her daughter, then at the contract, then back again. "Where did you get this?" "It was left out in the study. I think someone was reviewing it and forgot to put it back." "Elena." Maria's voice dropped to a harsh whisper. "You took this from his private papers. I didn't steal it, you had no right." Maria grabbed the document, folding it quickly. "This is not our business. These are private legal matters between rich people. We don't get involved." "But Mama, he's being tricked if he signs this." "Then that's his mistake to make." Maria's eyes were wide with fear now. "Elena, listen to me. People like us, we don't question people like them. We don't interfere. If they find out you were looking through his private documents, we'll both be fired. Worse, they could say you stole confidential information. Do you understand how serious this is?" Elena's throat tightened. "But it's not right." "Right doesn't matter when you have no power." Maria's voice cracked. "We survive by staying invisible. By doing our jobs and keeping our heads down. The world doesn't want the truth from people like us. It wants us quiet." Elena stared at her mother, seeing the fear in her eyes. The lifetime of learned helplessness. The survival instinct that came from years of being dismissed, ignored, invisible. But something in Elena refused to accept it. What if I could prove it? She said quietly. What if I could show him clearly what's in this contract? He has lawyers, Elena. Expensive ones. If they didn't catch it, what makes you think anyone will listen to a 14-year-old girl? Because I'm the only one who actually read it. Elena's voice was steady now, more certain. His lawyers probably wrote it themselves, or they were paid to miss it. But I have nothing to gain. I'm not on anyone's side. I just don't want to watch someone lose everything because nobody bothered to read the fine print. Maria closed her eyes, torn between protecting her daughter and respecting the courage she was witnessing. Mija, please. This isn't our fight. It is if we're the only ones who can stop it. Silence stretched between them. Finally, Maria spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. If you do this, we could lose everything. Our jobs, our home, they could destroy us. I know. Elena met her mother's eyes. But if we do nothing, he loses everything. And we watched it happen. Maria looked at her daughter for a long moment. This small, serious girl who somehow carried more moral clarity than most of the adults in this mansion. She exhaled slowly, then nodded once. If you're going to do this, do it smart. Don't just run to him with papers you're not supposed to have. You need to find the right moment. The right way. And you need to be ready for them to not believe you. Elena hugged her mother tightly. Thank you, Mama. Don't thank me yet. Maria pulled back, her expression grim. We might both regret this. That night, Elena carefully photographed every page of the contract with her phone. She made sure Section 47 was clear, readable, undeniable. Then she returned the physical document to the study, placing it exactly where she had found it. She had the evidence now. All she needed was the courage to use it. And the wedding was less than 48 hours away. Saturday arrived with perfect weather. The Eden Palace Hotel glittered like a jewel against the morning sky. White roses cascaded down marble columns. Crystal chandeliers caught the light, scattering rainbows across polished floors. Outside, luxury cars lined the circular driveway, and photographers jostled for position behind velvet ropes. This wasn't just a wedding. It was a spectacle. A merger. A headline waiting to happen. Elena and her mother arrived at 6 a.m. with the catering staff. They were there to help with final preparations, ensuring the service areas remained pristine and invisible to the guests. Maria wore her standard uniform. Elena wore a simple navy dress blending into the background as she'd been taught. But today, she carried something extra. Her phone tucked into her pocket with the contract photos saved and ready. She had rehearsed what she would say 100 times in her mind. She would approach Jonathan before the ceremony, show him the evidence calmly and clearly, and give him the choice to review it with his own lawyers. Simple, rational, respectful. But nothing about today would be simple. By 10 o'clock, the ballroom was transformed. 600 guests filled the gilded chairs. Politicians, celebrities, tech moguls, media executives, the kind of people whose presence was measured in power, not just wealth. Jonathan stood at the altar in a tailored black tuxedo, his expression calm and controlled. Beside him, his best man checked his watch. Behind them, an archway of white orchids framed the moment perfectly for the cameras broadcasting live to millions. Clara waited in the bridal suite upstairs, a vision in ivory silk and vintage lace, her makeup flawless, her smile practiced. Elena watched from the service corridor, her heart racing. She had tried 3 times to reach the groom's preparation room earlier, but each time security had turned her away. Family and wedding party only, no exceptions. She had tried to explain. I need to speak with Mr. Reed. It's urgent. The guard had looked at her uniform at her age and dismissed her with a glance. If it's about catering or setup, talk to the event coordinator. It's not about that. Then it can wait until after the ceremony. She had retreated, frustrated, searching for another way. Now, with the ceremony about to begin, her options were running out. Maria found her near the kitchen entrance, her face tight with worry. Elena, please. It's too late now. Just let it go. I can't, Mama. You'll embarrass us. You'll ruin everything. He's about to sign away his life. The orchestra began playing. The processional was starting. Bridesmaids in pale pink began their slow walk down the aisle. The guests rose to their feet. Elena's stomach twisted. She looked through the service entrance into the ballroom, watching Jonathan's face as Clara appeared at the far end of the aisle. He looked resigned. Not happy. Not in love. Just resolved to follow through with a decision already made. And then Elena saw something that made her blood run cold. Near the altar, partially hidden behind a floral arrangement, was a small mahogany table. On it sat a leather portfolio and a silver pen. Gerald, Jonathan's assistant, stood nearby, adjusting the placement. She recognized that portfolio. The same one Clara's team had delivered days ago. One of the ushers leaned toward Gerald, speaking quietly. Elena was close enough to the corridor to hear fragments. Sign immediately after vows. Photographer once the moment captured, binding before reception. They weren't waiting until later. They were going to have Jonathan sign the contract right there in front of everyone as part of the ceremony itself. A romantic gesture. The billionaire signing his commitment in front of the world. Except he had no idea what he was actually signing. Elena's chest tightened. If she didn't act now, in the next 10 minutes it would be done. Legally binding, irreversible. She looked at her mother, who was shaking her head, tears in her eyes. Mija, por favor. I'm sorry, Mama. Elena stepped out of the service corridor and into the grand ballroom. The music swelled. Clara reached the altar, her smile radiant. Jonathan took her hand. The officiant began to speak, his voice echoing through the space. Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today. Elena moved along the side wall, trying to stay hidden in the shadows, working her way toward the front. Her heart hammered so hard she thought everyone could hear it. Security noticed her movement. One guard started moving in her direction. She had seconds. The officiant continued. To witness the joining of these two lives, two families, two legacies. Jonathan and Clara stood facing each other, hands joined, the world watching. Gerald reached for the leather portfolio, preparing for the signing moment. Elena broke into a run. She burst through the edge of the seated guests, stumbling into the center aisle, her voice cracking but clear. Mr. Reed. Every head turned. The music stopped. The officiant fell silent mid-sentence. Jonathan's eyes found her confusion and recognition flashing across his face. Elena's legs felt like water, but she forced herself to keep walking forward, pulling her phone from her pocket with trembling hands. Mr. Reed, you can't sign that contract, please. Look at section 47. The ballroom erupted in whispers. Clara's face went white. Gerald moved toward Elena, but Jonathan held up a hand, stopping him. What are you talking about? Jonathan's voice was calm but edged with tension. Elena held up her phone, displaying the photographed page. Her voice shook, but she pushed through. This clause, right here. It transfers all ownership of Nexora to Vance Global the moment you sign. You won't just be sharing assets. You'll be giving away your entire company. The whispers turned into gasps. Cameras swiveled. Reporters began typing furiously. Jonathan stared at her, then at the portfolio on the table, then back at her. Show me. The ballroom felt like it had stopped breathing. 600 pairs of eyes fixed on the young girl standing in the center aisle, her phone held up like evidence at a trial, her simple dress a stark contrast to the silk and diamonds surrounding her. Jonathan stepped away from the altar, his movements precise and controlled. Let me see that. Elena walked forward, her legs shaking, but her resolve steady. She handed him the phone. He took it, his face unreadable, and began scrolling through the images she'd captured. His jaw tightened with each swipe. Behind him, Clara remained frozen at the altar, her bouquet trembling in her hands. Read it out loud, Jonathan said quietly, his voice carrying across the silent hall. So everyone can hear. Elena swallowed hard. Her throat was dry, her hands clammy. But she took the phone back and began reading from the screen, her voice wavering at first, then growing stronger. Section 47, subsection D. Upon execution of this marital agreement and legal union, all intellectual property rights, patents, trademarks, proprietary algorithms, and equity shares associated with Nexora Innovations shall be transferred in full to Vance Global Holdings as part of the consolidated marital estate. This transfer shall be irrevocable and binding upon signature. The whispers exploded into chaos. Reporters in the back began shouting questions. Guests pulled out their phones. Camera flashes erupted like lightning. The live broadcast cameras zoomed in on Jonathan's face, capturing the exact moment. Comprehension turned to fury. He strode to the mahogany table, grabbed the leather portfolio, and ripped it open. His eyes scanned the pages, rapidly flipping to section 47. His face went from controlled anger to barely restrained rage. This wasn't in the draft I reviewed. His voice was ice. Who added this? Clara stumbled forward, her face sheet white. Jonathan. I didn't know. You didn't know. He held up the document. Your legal team drafted this. Your father's company stands to gain everything. And you didn't know. I swear I never read that section. They told me it was standard. Standard. Jonathan's laugh was bitter and sharp. A clause that strips me of my entire company is standard. Gerald pushed through the crowd, his face panicked. Sir, I reviewed this contract myself. That clause wasn't there when I approved it 3 days ago. Then someone changed it. Jonathan's eyes swept the room, landing on a group of men in expensive suits standing near the Vance family section. Where's your CFO, Clara? Where's Bennett? A tall man with silver hair stood slowly, his expression carefully neutral. I'm here, Jonathan. Did you add this clause? I made certain amendments to protect Vance Global's interests in the merger. Bennett's voice was smooth, practiced. It's standard practice in high-value unions to consolidate assets for this isn't asset consolidation. This is theft. Jonathan threw the portfolio onto the floor. The pages scattered across the white carpet like accusations. You were going to have me sign this in front of cameras, make it binding before I could even read what I was signing. Mr. Reed, if you'd simply had competent legal counsel review. I did, and someone clearly bypassed them. Or paid them to look the other way. Jonathan turned to Clara, his voice dropping but losing none of its edge. Did you know? Tell me the truth. Clara's tears were real now, mascara beginning to streak. I knew this marriage was about business, about connecting our families. My father pushed for it, said it would be beneficial for both companies. Her voice cracked. But I didn't know about that clause. I didn't know they were planning to take everything from you. But you knew it wasn't about love. She looked down. Yes. And you were going to marry me anyway. I was told it was my duty, that it was what the family needed. The ballroom had gone eerily quiet now, every guest transfixed by the unraveling of what was supposed to be the social event of the decade. Jonathan looked at her for a long moment, something like pity crossing his face. Then he turned to Elena, who stood small and terrified near the altar steps. How did you find this? Elena's voice came out barely above a whisper. I saw the contract in your study. It was left out by accident. I like reading legal documents, and I noticed the clause. It didn't seem right. She looked up at him, her eyes filling with tears she fought to hold back. I was scared you were being tricked. I didn't know what else to do. You're the housekeeper's daughter. Yes, sir. You have no legal training. No, sir. I read a lot. Jonathan stared at her, this 14-year-old girl who had just saved him from financial ruin, who had found something his expensive lawyers had missed or ignored, who had risked everything to speak truth to power. What's your name? Elena, sir. Elena Cruz. He crouched down to her level, his voice gentle now. Elena, do you understand what you just did? Her lip trembled. I stopped you from signing something bad. You stopped me from losing everything I've built. My company. My work. 15 years of my life. He glanced back at the scattered contract pages. If I had signed that by tomorrow morning, I would have owned nothing. Legally, it would have all been theirs. I didn't want that to happen to you. Why, you don't know me. I'm just your mother's employer. Because... Elena's voice wavered. Because it's not right to trick people. Even rich people. And I was scared if I didn't say something no one else would. Jonathan stood slowly, his expression unreadable. Then he turned to face the assembled guests, the cameras, the watching world. This wedding is over. His voice carried absolute finality. There will be no ceremony, no signing, no merger. He looked at Clara. I'm sorry. Not for this, but for the fact that you were used as much as I was. He turned to the broadcast cameras. To everyone watching, be very careful what you sign. Even when you think you're protected. Even when you trust the people drafting the papers, he gestured to Elena. And listen to the people who have nothing to gain from lying to you. Sometimes they're the only ones telling the truth. He walked out of the ballroom, leaving behind the shattered remains of a $2 billion wedding. And Elena, standing alone in the center aisle, finally let herself cry. The ballroom descended into controlled chaos. Guests rose from their seats, talking in urgent whispers. Security tried to maintain order as reporters rushed toward the front, shouting questions. Camera operators scrambled to capture every angle of the scandal unfolding in real time. Maria pushed through the crowd, reaching her daughter and pulling her into a protective embrace. Mia, come on, we need to leave. But before they could move Jonathan's head of legal, a sharp-eyed woman named Catherine Morris appeared at the altar. She'd been seated in the front row and had immediately gone to retrieve the scattered contract pages. Mr. Reed, wait. Her voice cut through the noise. Jonathan paused at the edge of the room, turning back. Catherine held up several pages, her expression dark. I need 5 minutes with this. Something's wrong. She pulled out her tablet, opened a file, and began comparing. Her face grew progressively more severe as she read. Finally, she looked up. Sir, the version I approved on Tuesday did not contain Section 47, subsection D. At all. That entire section has been inserted since my final review. She turned to Bennett and the Vance legal team. This contract was modified after both parties' counsel signed off on it. That makes it fraudulent. Bennett's smooth demeanor cracked slightly. That's a serious accusation. It's a fact. Catherine's voice was steel. I have the original signed approval in my office, time-stamped and notarized. This document has been altered. Deliberately. To strip my client of his assets under the guise of a prenuptial agreement. A murmur ran through the crowd. Several board members from Nexora, who had been seated near the front, stood up, their faces registering shock and anger. Clara's father, Richard Vance, rose from his seat. He was a large man, commanding in presence, used to controlling narratives. But even he seemed shaken. Catherine, I'm sure this is a misunderstanding. No misunderstanding, Mr. Vance. She held up her tablet, showing the time-stamped original. Someone on your legal team inserted a clause after final approval banking on the ceremony's momentum and public pressure to prevent Mr. Reed from reviewing the document carefully before signing. Richard's face reddened. He turned to Bennett. Is this true? Bennett straightened his tie, his composure slipping. The amendment was made to protect Vance Global's position in the event of, you altered a legal contract without the other party's knowledge or consent. Catherine's voice could have cut glass. That's not protection. That's fraud. And it's prosecutable. The ballroom erupted again. Phones came out. Reporters began filing stories in real time. The hashtag #YourWeddingScandal started trending within minutes. Jonathan returned to the altar, his face a mask of cold fury. But when he looked at Clara, something in his expression softened slightly. She stood alone now, her bridal party having retreated, her father arguing with his legal team. She looked small, fragile, despite the elaborate dress and the millions in jewelry adorning her. Clara, Jonathan said quietly, did you know? She shook her head, tears streaming freely now, her carefully applied makeup ruined. I knew the marriage was strategic. I knew our families wanted to merge resources. But I didn't know about this. She gestured helplessly at the contract. My father told me it was a standard arrangement. That you'd agreed to everything. That this was what people at our level did. And you believed him. I wanted to believe him. Her voice broke. Because the alternative was admitting that my own father would use me as bait in a corporate takeover. Jonathan exhaled slowly. You were a pawn in this too. A willing one, maybe. I should have asked more questions. I should have... She looked around at the ruined ceremony, the staring guests, the cameras capturing her humiliation. I should have had the courage to say no. Why didn't you? Because I was raised to believe that duty came before everything, that personal happiness was secondary to family legacy. She met his eyes. I'm sorry, Jonathan. For all of it. He nodded once, not quite acceptance, but acknowledgement. Then he turned to where Maria still held Elena, the girl now crying silently into her mother's shoulder. Jonathan walked over to them. The crowd parted instinctively. Maria looked up at him, terrified. Mr. Reed, I'm so sorry, she shouldn't have interfered. Please don't apologize. He crouched down again, his voice gentle. Elena. She looked up at him, her young face blotchy and scared. Do you know what just happened? She shook her head. You saved me, not just from losing my company, from making the biggest mistake of my life. He glanced back at the altar, at the elaborate setup, at the hundreds of guests. All of this was designed to pressure me into signing without thinking. The cameras, the crowd, the momentum. Sign now, review later. Except later would have been too late. He looked at Maria. Your daughter saw through all of it. She found the trap, and she had the courage to speak up when everyone else, including me, was too caught up in the spectacle to see the truth. Maria's voice trembled. She was so scared you wouldn't believe her. I almost didn't. Jonathan's admission was quiet. For a second, when she first spoke, I thought she was confused. A child who'd misunderstood something she'd read. He looked at Elena again. But you weren't confused, were you? No, sir. You knew exactly what that clause meant. Yes, sir. And you knew speaking up could cost you and your mother everything. She nodded, new tears forming. That, Jonathan said, his voice firm and clear, is real courage. Not the kind you read about. The kind that risks everything for what's right. He stood and addressed the room one final time. This wedding is canceled. The merger is dead. And if anyone from Vance Global attempts to pursue this matter legally, I'll make sure every news outlet in the world knows exactly how they tried to commit corporate fraud disguised as a marriage contract. He turned to Elena and Maria. As for you two, don't go anywhere. We have a lot to talk about. And with that, he walked out of the ballroom, leaving behind the wreckage of a wedding that was never about love and a contract that was never meant to be fair. By Sunday morning, the story had exploded across every platform. Billionaire wedding halted by teen housekeeper's daughter. 14-year-old exposes corporate fraud hidden in marriage contract. The girl who saved a tech empire. News outlets replayed the footage endlessly. Elena's small figure standing in the ballroom, her voice shaking but clear as she read the fraudulent clause. Jonathan's face as comprehension dawned. Clara's tears. The scattered contract pages. Social media erupted. Elena, the truth teller, trended globally. Legal experts analyzed the contract on live television, calling it one of the most brazen attempts at corporate theft disguised as matrimony in modern history. Public opinion was unanimous. The girl was a hero. But in the small staff quarters of Jonathan's mansion, Elena just felt exhausted. Monday afternoon, there was a knock on their door. Maria opened it to find Jonathan standing there, no security, no assistants, just him in casual clothes, looking more human than either of them had ever seen him. May I come in? They sat at the tiny kitchen table, tea growing cold in mismatched cups. I've spent the last 2 days meeting with lawyers, board members, and the press, Jonathan began. The Vance legal team has been fired. Bennett is facing criminal charges. And Clara. He paused. She's going to therapy. She asked me to tell you she's sorry for what her family put you through. Elena nodded quietly. Jonathan leaned forward. But I didn't come here to talk about them. I came to talk about you. He pulled an envelope from his jacket. This is a full scholarship. Any school you want, any program. Law, if that's what interests you. Or anything else. Maria's hand flew to her mouth. Mr. Reed, this is too much. It's not nearly enough. His voice was firm but kind. Your daughter has a gift. She sees details others miss. She reads contracts the way some people read novels. She found a clause buried in 30 pages of legal jargon that multiple expensive lawyers either missed or deliberately ignored. He looked at Elena. That kind of analytical mind combined with moral courage is incredibly rare. Elena spoke softly. I just didn't want you to be tricked. I know, and that's exactly why this matters. He slid the envelope across the table. The scholarship is called the Legal Integrity Fund. You'll be the first recipient, but it won't be the last. I'm establishing it as a permanent program to support young people who demonstrate both legal aptitude and ethical courage. Why? Elena asked. Jonathan smiled slightly. Because you taught me something important. I'd become so surrounded by people who calculated every word, every clause, every advantage that I'd forgotten what honest concern looks like. He paused. You weren't trying to gain anything. You just saw something wrong and couldn't stay silent. That's the kind of person the legal system needs more of. Maria wiped tears from her eyes. How can we ever thank you? You already have. You raised a daughter who knows that truth matters more than convenience. That's a gift to the world. He stood. And Maria, you're getting a promotion. Estate manager with full benefits and a significant salary increase. Someone who taught their child to value integrity deserves to be recognized. After he left, Elena looked at the envelope still unopened. Mama, do you think I did the right thing? Maria pulled her daughter close. Misha, you did the brave thing. And sometimes that's even more important than right or wrong. You saw someone about to be hurt and you spoke up even though you were terrified. I was so scared. I know. But you did it anyway. That's what courage is. Elena finally opened the envelope. Inside was a letter and at the bottom a handwritten note. To see the small print clearly you have to look with your heart, not just your eyes. Thank you for seeing what I couldn't, Jr. The auditorium of Lincoln International Academy was filled to capacity. Elena stood on stage wearing the school's formal uniform, her hands folded in front of her as the headmaster announced her name. This year's recipient of the Legal Integrity Award for exceptional analytical skill and moral courage in the face of adversity, Elena Cruz. Applause erupted. Elena walked forward to receive the crystal trophy and certificate, her steps more confident than they'd been a year ago, though her cheeks still flushed with the attention. In the front row, Maria sat with tears streaming down her face, pride radiating from every fiber of her being. And beside her in a seat he'd requested specifically sat Jonathan Reed. He'd accepted the role of honorary advisor to the scholarship program, attending every award ceremony, meeting every recipient, ensuring the fund he'd established continued to identify young people who combined intelligence with integrity. When Elena reached the podium to give her acceptance speech, she looked out at the audience and took a breath. A year ago, I was just a girl who liked reading contracts nobody else wanted to read. I didn't think I was special. I just noticed things. She paused. But I learned that sometimes noticing isn't enough. Sometimes you have to speak, even when you're scared, even when you think nobody will listen. She glanced at Jonathan, who nodded encouragingly. This award isn't just about what I did. It's about what all of us can do. We can choose to see the truth even when it's hidden. We can choose to speak up even when it's hard. And we can choose to believe that honesty matters more than power. The applause was thunderous. After the ceremony, Jonathan approached Maria. You should be incredibly proud. I am. Maria's voice trembled with emotion. She's grown so much. She was already remarkable. She just needed the world to catch up and notice. He smiled. In my business, people dress up lies as opportunities all the time. Your daughter stripped away the packaging and showed everyone the truth underneath. That's not a skill you can teach. That's character. As they watched Elena pose for photos with other award recipients, both smiling and confident, Jonathan added quietly, sometimes the people who clean our houses see more clearly than the people who run our companies. I almost forgot that. Thank God Elena didn't. Elena's story reminds us of something we too often forget. Truth doesn't need a loud voice. It just needs someone brave enough to speak it. Courage has nothing to do with age, wealth, or position. Sometimes the smallest person in the room carries the greatest integrity. Sometimes a 14-year-old sees what teams of lawyers deliberately miss. When trust is sold for profit, when love becomes transaction, when contracts hide traps instead of protecting people, that's when we lose what matters most. Not money. not power, but the ability to believe in each other. Elena didn't stop a wedding. She stopped a betrayal. She prevented a good man from being destroyed by people who valued his assets more than his trust. And she did it not because she had anything to gain, but because watching someone be deceived, even someone powerful, was something her conscience couldn't accept. That's the kind of courage the world desperately needs. Not the courage to win. The courage to tell the truth when silence would be easier. If you believe that truth always finds its voice when someone is brave enough to speak, comment below. Truth always finds its voice. I'm curious, where are you listening from, and what time is it right now? Drop a comment and let me know. Thank you for spending your time with me and for listening to this story. And don't forget to subscribe to Maid's Daughter Stories for more tales where small acts of courage light up even the biggest, darkest rooms.